Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and start with our second screencast of the year. Remember to go ahead and take any kind of notes you feel comfortable with on this, but there will be a quiz based on the information from these two screencasts. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about the progressives here. We did the mock news conference in today to kind of get a background. Let me give you a little bit more information on the progressive era and everything that happened. First of all, the thing you need to understand was progressivism was really a collection of different ideas and activities. It wasn't one little political movement. It was a combination of many things. A lot of people during this time believed that immigration, industrialization, it created a lot of social problems in the United States. So a lot of these people, a lot of these progressives believed it was the government's responsibility to take more an active role in solving the social problems and instituting a lot of new changes. Like I said, they wanted to fix the problems of the cities and the factories. They're really reformers. You'll hear that term kind of phrased a lot of reform, social reform, political reform, everything during this era. The big things they were concerned about were, first of all, the big businesses, the monopolies that were taking place during this time. They believed big businesses had too much power, eliminating competition, thus hurting the people, taking people out of jobs, but driving up the prices with the trusts that were happening during this time. So that's one thing they wanted to change. And also immigrants, they had some issues not only with their working conditions and those things, which we'll talk about, but a lot of people were a little scared of immigrants coming over with new ideas, okay, from socialism to unions to all these things. So they kind of want to just have the government step in and reform society at this time. The problems. Okay, the workers were working in unsafe conditions. There were no labor laws like we have today put in place. So there were no hourly rates, amount of hours people could work, any of those things. So that's what they were looking for. Children. We talked about laissez-faire, the government, and the government didn't even step in to help children. We had kids as young as 9, 10, 11 years old working in these factories, as coal mines, and they were just completely unsafe for them. They didn't have the child labor laws like we do today. The meat packing, we've talked about that in class with Upton Sinclair in his book, The Jungle, that exposed all these troubles from the meat packing industry of, pretty much no one checking what type of food was going out. And many people living in terrible poverty in the tenements. You had 4 or 5 households of people living in one little crowded apartment. So these were the issues they were looking at. And large corporations take advantage of the consumers with the monopolies, with the trusts, just taking advantage of everything. And then obviously with the big businesses, they had a lot of money, so they had a lot of control in government, which still happens today. Big businesses, whether we like it or not, have a lot to say in government, politics, and everything of laws, things that go on today, just like back then. So what these progressives wanted.
That's very important.
Were safer working conditions. Okay, they wanted you better work hours, and just you got to realize in factories, you're dealing with these heavy machinery, and there was a lot of worker accidents. So they wanted the people taken care of.
Oh yes, that's very important.
Better food preparation. Okay, like we said, we got the FDA now. Back then, they had none of that.
Oh yes, that's very important.
Better living conditions. They wanted people to have an opportunity to find better housing instead of the tenements and the slums that a lot of them were living in.
Oh yes, that's very important.
And less corruption in government. Like we talked about political machines. They ran a lot of different things. The corruption in politics, and a lot of that was big businesses. You had the robber barons. You had all these different people that were put in charge and were taking advantage of the system. That was one of the major issues that people were looking at is we want to do a lot of social reforms, but first we got to take care of the government before we're able to do anything.
Oh yes, that's very important.
And control of the trust, like we talked about. Remember the trust, the term, that was one thing we looked at with these different businesses coming together to form a trust, to form monopolies, those things. So they wanted to have more government control on how these were all working.
Oh yes, that's very important.
And rights for women. We'll get more into that as we go forward with women's suffrage, the 19th Amendment. But that was another major issue as well.
Oh yes, that's very important.
And just more rights for the average voter. Okay, to have more say in what goes, and that kind of also goes back to the political corruption. More of a voter democratic system. So exposing the truth. We've talked about this. They use the power of the government, city, state, all these types of people, and we've talked about in class who these people were. The biggest things were these journalists who played the role, and we've talked about in class. They are known as the muckrakers or muckrackers, however you want to pronounce it. They're pretty much just people who dug up the muck, dug up the truth, found things that were going on. That's what they were. Think of them as investigative reporters today. An example of a muckraker would be the two journalists who exposed the Watergate scandal with Nixon, all those things. And this can trace kind of the lineage back to here with these journalists who were looking to expose the truth. A couple examples of them. Jacob Riis, we've talked about him. I'm just kind of quickly flip through these pictures. You can pause, take a look at them, but really notice the pictures and really what was going on. He really detailed the poverty in these photos. Okay. Another guy was Lewis Hine. He looked more at the child labor. Okay, you can see, by 2 million children under the age of 15 were working. I mean, you look at that today, obviously that wouldn't happen with the labor laws, but most kids, you're working under 15, you don't go to school, you don't get an education, so you can't better yourself. You're just put to work to try to help the family. And these are some pictures of Lewis Hine with the child workers here. Okay. What I want you to do real quick is just press pause on this during this and just write a quick reflection like it says on, how you think those pictures, what they were doing, could help with reform social problems. So go ahead and do that right now. Another guy like we talked about is Upton Sinclair. We talked about him in the jungle, what he did to expose these things. It led to the Meat Inspection Act, what we have in place today. What I want you to do again, press pause real quick. I want you to read this little excerpt. This is a quote from his book, The Jungle, kind of detailing what was going on. I want you to just kind of a quick read this, pause on it, and then just quite a quick reflection. If you're reading this book for the first time during this era, what you would think. So go ahead and pause it real quick. There's a nice little pictures to catch your attention too, and make it look what you're actually eating there and what they were eating during that time. So finally, to wrap up here, really what needed to change, like we said, government needed to change, and like we talked about in class, McKinley, who was a big backer of the big businesses, does actually get assassinated. His vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, is going to take over. And there's really a lot of confusion during this time because you had McKinley and Roosevelt who had completely different opinions on all politics, why McKinley had Roosevelt as vice president. But Roosevelt does take over and he tries to change things. He comes in and he was a progressive politician who fought against corruption. That's what he made his name for. That's what he was trying to do during this time. He became president in 1901. And really what he was trying to do, he went after trust. He didn't want to break up all trust, but he wanted to limit and really look at some different things with that. He wanted to end harmful monopolies because, again, he was looking out for the people. And really what he did and what we talked about in class with the kind of brief intro and with the mock press conference we had today, he was known as the trustbuster. Okay? That was his name, and he really went in, and he was one of the big things. He also got into looking out for the environment. He's got a lot of environmental things that are put in place today. But really during this time, the biggest thing to kind of wrap this up about the progressives, what you need to know is that it was a time of change, reform. Socially, politically, everything during this time happened, and things just continue to change. And we will kind of look at a few things as we go further in class over the next week. But make sure, look at your notes, look back on this if you have to, pause any things, write reflections, look at why these things changed during this time. And again, like I said, we will have a quiz on this material, this one and the previous one. So hopefully you got something out of it. If you have questions, come talk to me. But this should give you a little bit better understanding of everything. All right, see you guys.